Chapter 7: The Gathering of Dreamers. The labyrinth shifted. One moment, the protagonist was running through an endless hall. The next, the world had bent and buckled around them. They were tumbling through a kaleidoscope of impossible angles, twisting and turning until they were cast out into an openness so vast it stole their breath. They landed on their knees in the soft grass, pushing themselves up to stare in wonder and growing fear at the alien landscape that stretched to the horizon. Above them, the sky was a canopy of infinite doors, each one glowing softly like a distant star. These portals turned slowly, majestically, like a celestial clockwork, ever turning, ever silent. But even as the protagonist stood there, mesmerized, a disquiet settled upon them. The air grew thick, the light took on a sickly cast, and for the first time since entering the labyrinth, they felt something akin to dread. They were not alone. Across the rolling grasslands, they saw movement, a dark shape rising from behind a clump of shimmering trees. At first, it was just a silhouette, then a coalescing mass of shadows. And as it drew nearer, the protagonist felt a chill crawl up their spine. It wasn't a creature, not in any conventional sense. It was a will, a consciousness made manifest. But even from afar, the protagonist could sense its power thrumming in the air like a struck chord, vibrating in their very bones. As it drew closer, the entity began to take shape, coalescing into the rough form of a human, yet somehow otherworldly. Their features were sharp, almost predatory, and their eyes burned with an inner fire. Threads of that same fire wove around their body, crackling and dancing like living things. They were a whirlwind of motion, of raw, untamed power, and the very air around them seemed to crackle with energy. Then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the advance stopped. The entity halted a few paces away, regarding the protagonist with an intensity that was both unnerving and compelling. In that moment, without a word being spoken, without a sound at all, both knew who the other was. Dreamweavers. The stranger regarded them with sharp eyes, gauging, assessing, and in their gaze, the protagonist saw a flicker of recognition, perhaps even a hint of surprise. But what emotions burned brightest in those depths were caution and wariness. And in the silence that stretched between them, the protagonist understood that they were not here for a friendly exchange. This was not a chance encounter in a dream world. No, this was a confrontation, a clash of wills, a meeting of equals. And before they could even draw a breath, the fire erupted. The stranger moved with blinding speed, contorting the dream around them, twisting and coiling the very essence of the landscape into firestorms and molten walls. Each attack was precise, relentless, testing, probing for weaknesses in the protagonist's weaving. In response, the protagonist wove threads of radiant light, forging shields to deflect the fiery onslaughts and cutting through illusions with baleful precision. The battle raged across the alien arena, shaking the very foundations of the dream world, each strike echoing like thunder across the void. But amidst the fury of the fight, there was a strange harmony, a kind of beautiful violence that spoke of kindred spirits locked in mortal combat. There was no hatred in this battle, only a fierce respect. Every move the protagonist made was met with an equal and opposite reaction. Every thread of fire they deflected sparked another. Every burst of radiant light was answered by a whip-crack of flame. It was a dance of death, a ballet of blades and bolts, a symphony of fire and light. Yet, for all its ferocity, the battle was not without its pauses. Lulls in the onslaught where both combatants stood back to back, chests heaving, catching their breath, gauging the other. For a brief moment, the fire abated, replaced by a fragile quiet. The The stranger regarded the protagonist with intense eyes, their own face streaked with soot and determination. And when they spoke, their voice was rough, like grinding stone, yet resonant with power. "So, you've awakened. But understand this, we are not alone. There are others, and not all of them seek to protect. Some will use their power to rule, to consume. This dream world is a battlefield, whether you wish it or not." Their words hung in the air, heavy with warning, leaving no room for polite pleasantries. The protagonist had indeed sensed that much themselves, but hearing it aloud, feeling the conviction in the stranger's tone, the gravity of their words settled upon them like a shroud. This dream world, this place of infinite possibilities, was not a sanctuary, not a refuge. It was a war zone, and they, whether they wished it or not, were now a part of it. The stranger didn't offer an alliance, no hand of fellowship, no promise of protection. What they offered was stark, brutal, uncompromising. Survive or be consumed. As if to underscore their words, the calm was shattered. The fire rekindled, blazing anew, hotter, fiercer than before. The attacks came in a flurry, forcing the protagonist onto the defensive. The stranger pressed their advantage, driving the protagonist back, keeping them on the run. Yet even in the heat of the battle, the protagonist saw a strange method to the madness. It wasn't just about defeating them, about proving their strength. It was about testing, about seeing if they would break. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the onslaught ceased. The stranger stood before them, chest heaving, eyes gleaming with a fire that had nothing to do with the flames still dancing around them. "Who are you?" the protagonist asked, their voice ragged, their body aching with exertion. The stranger regarded them for a long moment, then dipped their head in what might have been a nod, though it was hard to tell beneath their hood. "A guardian," they said, their voice hoarse, "like you." The answer was cryptic, but the stranger offered no further explanation. Instead, they turned and strode toward the infinite doors in the sky, melting away into the endless twilight. As they disappeared, they left a final message seared into the marble floor with a single step. "When the labyrinth calls again, follow the fire. Only then will you find the truth." With that, the dreamscape dissolved. The grassy plain became a swirling vortex of colors, shapes, and sensations, and the protagonist found themselves hurtling through the familiar kaleidoscope of the labyrinth once more. They tumbled out into the welcoming darkness, their heart racing, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The alien world receded, leaving behind only the echo of sensations and the memory of a confrontation that had been more than a battle. It had been a test, a trial by fire and light, a baptism into a world they were only just beginning to understand. They were not alone in this labyrinth, not by a long shot. There were others like them, Dreamweavers, who walked this world of infinite possibilities, shaping it to their will, protecting it from the encroaching darkness. But there were also others, the stranger had warned. Those who sought to consume, to rule, to bend the dream world to their own dark purposes. And somewhere in the shifting sands of the labyrinth, those whispers of malice grew, stirring in the darkness, waiting for their chance to strike. As the protagonist rose to their feet, brushing the remnants of the dreamscape from their clothes, a new resolve settled upon them. They were not a lone wanderer in a god-forsaken realm. They were a part of something larger, a tapestry of wills and powers that wove together the very fabric of the dream world. They had faced the fire and light and survived. They had stared into the heart of a burning labyrinth and emerged unbroken. They had met another dreamer and come away with more questions than answers, but also with a purpose. Ahead lay the infinite doors, each one a portal to a different reality, a different possibility. And somewhere beyond those portals, the truth waited. The stranger had spoken of a gathering of kindred spirits who walked this world, some seeking to protect it, others to plunder it, and still others who had succumbed to its whispers and turned to the darkness. The protagonist knew now that their journey was far from over. The labyrinth had claimed them, body and soul, and now it was time to embrace that truth. The labyrinth had shifted once more, reshaping the world around them, and the protagonist found themselves standing at the precipice of a new dawn.